Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. ICJ rules on Israel's obligations in Gaza and West Bank. Ukrainian children killed in Russian strikes. Hostages and casualties following the October 7th attacks. Trump's Ukraine efforts face obstacles. U.S. works to stabilize Gaza ceasefire. Ukraine attacks Russian chemical plant. Nigeria's farmers face ongoing threats. SpaceX cuts services to Myanmar scam camps. Trump's tariffs impact India's oil strategy. Colombian court overturns Uribe conviction. Australian ambassador criticized for Trump encounter. Trump's peace efforts in Middle East and Ukraine struggle. British grandmother's repatriation shows Indonesia's drug sentencing. Methanol poisoning risks spread worldwide. ICJ issues binding opinion on Israel's obligations to UN agencies in Gaza and West Bank. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, has delivered a significant advisory opinion concerning Israel's legal obligations towards the United Nations agencies and international organizations operating in the occupied West Bank and Gaza Strip. Following a request from the UN General Assembly, the ICJ addressed the contentious issue of Israel's restrictions on UN activities, particularly those of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA. The opinion, while non-binding, carries substantial moral and diplomatic weight, highlighting the court's assessment of Israel's actions. The core of the dispute revolves around Israel's recently passed laws prohibiting UNRWA's operations on Israeli territory and restricting contact with Israeli officials, fueled by accusations of Hamas infiltration within UNRWA. Israel vehemently denies these claims, asserting that UNRWA lacks neutrality and that a significant number of its staff are linked to Hamas. However, the ICJ has definitively refuted Israel's allegations, stating that there is no substantiated evidence to support these claims. Crucially, the ICJ determined that Israel is legally obligated to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip by the United Nations and its entities, ensuring the basic needs of Palestinian civilians are met. This ruling directly addresses the ongoing blockade imposed by Israel since the start of the conflict with Hamas, which has severely restricted the entry of food and other essential supplies to the 2.1 million population. Prior to the recent ceasefire, UN-backed experts estimated that over 640,000 people faced catastrophic food insecurity, with a declared entirely man-made famine in Gaza City. Israel contested this assessment, maintaining that sufficient food was being allowed into the territory. UNRWA's acting Gaza director welcomed the ICJ's opinion, stating that it underscores Israel's legal obligations under international law, particularly regarding the agency's operations and the delivery of aid. The court's decision represents a forceful assertion of international legal standards in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Ukrainian children killed in Russian strikes. Trump signals potential shift in Gaza strategy. Recent news reports detail escalating Russian attacks on Ukraine, coinciding with uncertainty surrounding a proposed Trump-Putin summit and a shift in Trump's approach to the Gaza conflict. Multiple reports confirm that Russian drone and missile strikes resulted in civilian casualties, including children, with a kindergarten in Kharkiv being severely damaged and a 6-month-old baby killed in a residential district east of Kyiv. These attacks followed a wave of power cuts across Ukraine, further highlighting the ongoing intensity of the conflict. Amidst these developments, Donald Trump has indicated a potential willingness to reconsider the U.S. stance on Gaza, suggesting a possible pathway to a negotiated resolution. In a social media post, Trump stated he wanted to see Ukraine and Russia jibiso heshiiska nabata yi Gaza, and implied that the U.S. would sai boxta u galan Gaza. This represents a departure from previous statements regarding the conflict. The attacks on Ukraine underscore the continued disruption and devastation caused by the Russian invasion. The shelving of the Trump-Putin summit, initially planned for Budapest, reflects the lack of progress in securing a ceasefire. Trump's comments suggest a renewed interest in facilitating a diplomatic solution, potentially contingent on Ukraine making territorial concessions. The use of Storm Shadow missiles by Ukraine to target the Bryansk chemical plant, a Russian facility producing gunpowder and explosive materials, demonstrates Ukraine's continued efforts to leverage advanced weaponry against Russian infrastructure. Furthermore, the White House has clarified that there are no plans for a Trump-Putin meeting in the immediate future. Despite Trump's recent statements, the situation remains fluid, with ongoing diplomatic efforts and continued military action on both sides of the conflict. The focus remains on securing a lasting peace, but significant obstacles persist, particularly regarding territorial disputes and the demands of both Russia and Ukraine. The international community continues to grapple with the complex dynamics of the conflict and the urgent need for a resolution. Hostage status and casualties following the October 7th attacks. Following the devastating October 7th attacks, the status of numerous hostages held by Hamas remains a complex and evolving situation. While some have been released as part of temporary ceasefires, a significant number remain in captivity, with varying levels of confirmed information. Several individuals were confirmed dead as a direct result of the attacks. These include Tamir Adar, 38, a member of Nur Oz's community security squad, whose body was taken to Gaza. Joshua Mullah, 21, a Tanzanian student, was killed near Nahal Oz. Gaia Laos, 26, died from injuries sustained during the Nova Festival attack. Eliyahu Margalit, 75, was killed in Nir Oz. Tamir Nurotra, 19, was killed near Gaza perimeter. Omer Nutra, 21, was killed near Nahal Oz. Dror Or, 48, was killed in Nir Oz along with his Wynet. Daniel Peretz, 22, was killed near Nahal Oz. The majority of hostages remain unaccounted for. Among those whose fates are still uncertain is Tamir Nimrodi, 20, an education officer in the IDF. Bipin Joshi, 24, a Nepalese agricultural student, is one of the two men whose status is unknown. Significant progress has been made through temporary ceasefires. Many hostages were released, including Karina Engelbart, Mika Engel, Yuval Engel, Noman Alma Baruch, and Alma and her brother. However, a substantial number remain in captivity. The IDF confirmed that several deceased hostages' bodies were taken to Gaza. Dror Or, 48, and his wife, Yonat, were killed in Nir Oz. Ongoing efforts are focused on securing the release of all remaining hostages. The situation remains fluid, with intelligence agencies continuously working to gather information and coordinate rescue operations. The release of the hostages is a central priority, alongside investigations into the events of October 7th and efforts to hold those responsible accountable. Trump's Ukraine efforts stalled despite Gaza breakthrough. Recent developments highlight a significant disparity in Donald Trump's ability to broker peace in Ukraine compared to his recent success in mediating a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Following his announcement of a planned summit with Vladimir Putin in Budapest, the meeting was indefinitely suspended, alongside the cancellation of a preliminary diplomatic gathering. Trump's motivation stems from a desire to get Russia done, mirroring his approach in Gaza. However, replicating the circumstances that facilitated the Gaza breakthrough proves challenging due to the protracted nature of the Ukraine conflict. Steve Witkoff, Trump's lead diplomatic negotiator, identified Israel's attack on Hamas negotiators in Qatar as a pivotal moment, granting Trump leverage to pressure Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump's established relationships with Israel, including the embassy relocation and stances on settlements, provided a crucial advantage. Conversely, Trump's leverage in Ukraine is considerably diminished. His attempts to pressure Putin and Zelensky over the past 9 months have yielded little effect. Trump has employed tactics such as threatening sanctions on Russian energy exports and offering Ukraine long-range weapons, but these actions have been met with hesitation due to potential global economic disruption. He has also publicly criticized Zelensky, temporarily halting intelligence sharing and arms shipments, only to reverse course under pressure from European allies concerned about a Ukrainian collapse. Notably, Putin may be strategically utilizing Trump's preference for face-to-face meetings and desire for deals. A summit in Alaska, initially agreed upon as Trump considered sanctions, was subsequently postponed. As Trump contemplated supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles and Patriot anti-air batteries, Putin contacted him, suggesting the Budapest summit. The subsequent meeting with Zelensky at the White House resulted in no concrete outcomes, with Trump asserting he wasn't being manipulated. The situation underscores the complexities of the conflict and the challenges Trump faces in achieving a resolution, demonstrating a significant difference in his diplomatic effectiveness across the two scenarios. U.S. intensifies efforts to stabilize Gaza ceasefire, following a flare-up of violence that threatened to collapse the 12-day Gaza ceasefire. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Israel to bolster efforts to solidify the truce and initiate long-term peace negotiations. Alongside U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Vance aimed to persuade Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to begin discussions surrounding the second phase of President Donald Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan. This plan envisions an interim government, international stabilization force, Israeli troop withdrawal, and Hamas disarmament. The situation escalated after a Hamas anti-tank missile attack, resulting in the deaths of 2 Israeli soldiers in southern Gaza, prompting retaliatory Israeli airstrikes that killed dozens of Palestinians. Israel, citing a blatant ceasefire breach, resumed enforcement, while Hamas reiterated its commitment to the agreement. Despite this, further Israeli fire resulted in the deaths of 4 Palestinians. President Trump emphasized the success of the ceasefire, stating Hamas would be very good and warning of potential eradication if they violated the agreement. He highlighted the return of 13 of 28 Israeli hostages' bodies, secured through the exchange of almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. Hamas's chief negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya, affirmed the group's commitment to fully implementing the ceasefire, acknowledging extreme difficulty in recovering bodies due to a lack of specialist equipment. The return of another hostage's body, Tal Haimi, was confirmed by Israeli authorities, marking a significant step in the release process. The Israeli military's actions, including resuming enforcement of the ceasefire and engaging in targeted operations, were directly linked to the ongoing security challenges. Hamas continued to insist on fulfilling its obligations, emphasizing the urgency of securing the remaining hostages. Remains a key point of contention. The exchange of prisoners further complicated the dynamic, with Israel expressing concern over Hamas's delayed return of all deceased hostages. The U.S. envoy's visit represents a concentrated effort to navigate this complex situation and secure a lasting resolution to the conflict. Ukraine's energy infrastructure, under siege. Chernihiv blackout highlights growing crisis. The Ukrainian city of Chernihiv is currently experiencing a total blackout following a massive assault by Russian forces, impacting hundreds of thousands and resulting in 4 deaths and 10 injuries, including a 10-year-old girl. This attack, part of a broader pattern of intensified Russian strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, specifically targeting electricity-generating facilities, rail networks, and civilian businesses. The region, bordering both Russia and Belarus, faces limited air defense capabilities, exacerbating the vulnerability. Over 100 Shade drones and 6 ballistic missiles were deployed in the attack, leaving the city without power and disrupting water supplies through the loss of pumping stations. The attacks, occurring over 6 months and significantly increasing in intensity over the past 2 months, are causing substantial damage, with estimates exceeding over $16 billion. These strikes are not limited to frontline areas, with Russia targeting petrol stations, further demonstrating a deliberate strategy to cripple civilian infrastructure. The disruption of power supplies is severely impacting daily life, forcing residents to rely on emergency water deliveries. Ukrainian officials, including Deputy Head of the Chernihiv Regional Military Administration Andriy Podorvin, report that the country's energy resilience is rapidly depleting, posing a significant economic and psychological threat with a harsh winter approaching. The slow production and transportation times for replacement equipment, taking over a year to produce a single transformer, highlight the urgent need for external assistance. Despite the ongoing attacks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's recent meetings with U.S. President Donald Trump and leading U.S. energy companies have yielded positive results, focusing on strategies to bolster and modernize Ukraine's energy sector. While the acquisition of long-range Tomahawk missiles remained elusive, discussions with U.S. energy firms are providing critical support. Morale remains high among Ukrainian citizens, demonstrating resilience in the face of the relentless assault. The situation underscores the vulnerability of Ukraine's energy sector and the escalating scale of the conflict. Ukraine strikes Russian chemical plant with UK-made Storm Shadow missiles, amid escalating conflict. Recent developments reveal a significant escalation in the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Ukrainian forces successfully utilize UK-manufactured Storm Shadow missiles to strike a key Russian chemical plant in Bryansk, a region vital to Moscow's military-industrial complex. The plant, responsible for producing gunpowder, explosives, and rocket fuel components, was described as a key facility by Ukrainian officials. This attack, deemed a successful hit, circumvented Russian air defense systems. Simultaneously, Russia responded with a substantial drone and missile attack targeting multiple Ukrainian regions, resulting in 6 fatalities, including 2 children, and widespread power outages in Kiev and surrounding areas. The assault caused significant damage to buildings in Kiev, according to Mayor Vitaly Klitschko and military administration head Timur Tikachenko, who reported 2 deaths. These attacks followed a meeting at the White House where U.S. President Donald Trump indicated a reluctance to provide Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, citing Russia's refusal to cease fighting along the current front line. Trump's shift in position, previously advocating for a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, was put on hold due to concerns about a wasted meeting. European leaders, including UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, have pledged to intensify pressure on Russia's economy and defense industry until a lasting peace is achieved. This joint statement emphasizes Ukraine's need to be in the strongest possible position before, during, and after any ceasefire negotiations. The ongoing conflict continues to inflict casualties and damage, highlighting the complex and protracted nature of the war. The strategic targeting of Russian military infrastructure, coupled with diplomatic efforts, remains central to both Ukraine's defense and the pursuit of a resolution to the conflict. Nigeria's farmers face ongoing threat despite security efforts. The security situation for farmers in northeastern Nigeria, particularly in Borno State, remains critically precarious despite government initiatives aimed at bolstering their protection. Following 15 years of conflict instigated by Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa Promise ASWAP, farmers face daily threats of abduction, murder, and extortion, significantly impacting food production and livelihoods. The Agro Rangers, a specialized security unit established by the government, provides armed protection to farmers, escorting them to their fields and establishing fortified zones for planting. However, the scheme is limited in scope, with only 600 armed rangers covering vast agricultural areas, and resources are inadequate to address the widespread insecurity. Despite the presence of Agro Rangers, farmers report continued attacks and a pervasive fear for their lives. Many have been kidnapped and killed for ransom, while others have been murdered outright, highlighting the vulnerability of rural communities. The situation is exacerbated by the displacement of populations and the disruption of agricultural activities. Food insecurity is widespread, with nearly 4 million people facing shortages due to the conflict. Government efforts to reintegrate displaced people back onto the land, known as the Stabilization Agenda, are intended to counter disruptions in food production, but the pace of these efforts is seen as too slow. The International Crisis Group warns that the policy is putting internally displaced people in danger, as militant groups continue to extort farmers for funds. The Agro Rangers have been credited with deterring attacks, but the ongoing threat underscores the complexity of the conflict. Farmers express frustration with the military's response, citing instances where security operatives flee from insurgent attacks. The NSCDC acknowledges the challenges and plans to expand the Agro Rangers scheme, but recognizes that a long-term solution requires sustained effort and significant resources. The BBC's reporting indicates a need for increased military engagement and a more comprehensive strategy to address the root causes of the conflict. The situation remains deeply concerning, with farmers expressing a desperate desire for lasting security and the ability to return to their livelihoods without fear of violence. SpaceX terminates Starlink services to Myanmar scam camps. SpaceX has taken decisive action, terminating Starlink satellite communication links to over 2,500 devices utilized by numerous scam compounds operating along the Thai-Myanmar border. This move follows the Myanmar military's recent takeover of KK Park, a major compound previously controlled by insurgent groups, and the subsequent release of over 2,000 workers. The military's operation resulted in the confiscation of 30 Starlink terminals. These scam compounds, estimated to number over 30, are facilitating international human trafficking and fraudulent schemes, generating billions of dollars annually. Primarily operated by Chinese crime syndicates, they lure victims, often from African nations, under false pretenses of legitimate employment, only to confine them to exploitative conditions involving forced criminal activity, including grueling hours, torture, and beatings. SpaceX's head of business operations, Lauren Dreyer, stated that the company proactively identified and disabled the devices, emphasizing its commitment to preventing misuse of the service and maintaining global trust. The company's actions align with its mission to connect the unconnected and combat illicit activities. The military's reclamation of KK Park highlights the strategic importance of these scam centers within Myanmar's ongoing conflict. The junta relies on these operations, alongside Chinese support, to maintain its grip on power while battling various rebel groups. Despite SpaceX's intervention, at least 30 other scam compounds remain active, employing tens of thousands globally and potentially protected by militia groups. The situation underscores the complex interplay between technology, criminal enterprises, and geopolitical instability. SpaceX's response represents a rare instance of proactive intervention, but the scale of the problem with numerous remaining compounds suggests a persistent challenge requiring continued vigilance and potentially broader solutions. The BBC's reporting documented the scale of the operation and the conditions faced by the victims, further illuminating the severity of the situation. Trump tariffs and India's oil shift, a shifting narrative. U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly asserted that India has significantly reduced its purchases of Russian crude oil, claiming Prime Minister Narendra Modi assured him during a phone call on Tuesday that India was not going to buy much oil from Russia, with the shared goal of ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. This assertion followed similar statements made by Trump last week, which were initially met with denial from the Indian Foreign Ministry, stating they were not aware of the call. Following Trump's reiteration during White House Diwali celebrations, the Indian ministry continued to offer no new comment. The situation highlights a significant shift in India's energy policy. Initially, India dramatically increased its imports of Russian oil, capitalizing on discounted prices following Western sanctions imposed after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. This decision was framed as vital for ensuring energy security for India's vast population. Notably, the U.S. continues to maintain trade relations with Russia, a point consistently brought up by Trump. Following Trump's claims, the U.S. government has responded by imposing additional tariffs on India as a penalty for continuing to purchase Russian oil. This escalation underscores the tension surrounding the issue. The Indian government's stance has remained steadfast, prioritizing energy needs while navigating international pressure. The ongoing dispute reveals a complex geopolitical dynamic with significant economic implications for both nations, and a critical test of India's foreign policy independence. The future of India's relationship with Russia and its position within the global energy market remains uncertain, dependent on the evolving circumstances of the conflict and the broader international response. Colombian court reverses Uribe conviction following legal challenges. A Colombian court has overturned the criminal conviction of former President Álvaro Uribe, a move that followed a previous sentencing of 12 years in house arrest. Uribe, who served as president from 2002 to 2010 and is known for his aggressive stance against the FARC rebels, was initially found guilty of ordering a bribe to discredit paramilitary claims of his connections to the groups. He consistently maintained his innocence. The Superior Court in Bogotá, after reviewing the case, determined that the testimony of former paramilitary commander Luis Carlos Villegas lacked credibility, a key factor in the initial conviction. Furthermore, the court identified irregularities in the acquisition of wiretaps used during the investigation, leading to the reversal of the verdict. The ruling represents a significant development in a protracted legal battle. The decision has drawn criticism from various quarters. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had previously voiced his disapproval, arguing that Uribe's sole transgression was his dedication to defending Colombia. Current President Gustavo Petro, Colombia's first left-wing leader, strongly condemned the outcome, accusing it of concealing the history of paramilitary governance and its ties to drug trafficking. The case stemmed from allegations involving bribery and Uribe's alleged links to paramilitary groups, which emerged in the 1980s as a response to Marxist-inspired guerrilla groups. These groups, often involved in the cocaine trade, were responsible for numerous human rights violations, including massacres and disappearances. The conflict between these groups and the state, along with their involvement in trafficking routes and resources, resulted in lasting rivalries. Human Rights Watch has documented the involvement of both paramilitary and guerrilla groups in such atrocities. The court's decision signifies a complex and contentious chapter in Colombia's recent history, raising questions about justice, accountability, and the enduring legacy of armed conflict. Australian ambassador faces criticism following Trump encounter. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has staunchly defended his ambassador to the United States, Kevin Rudd, following a contentious exchange with former President Donald Trump during a meeting at the White House. The incident occurred on Monday, during a high-stakes inaugural visit for Albanese. Trump reportedly expressed his disapproval of Rudd, stating, "I don't like you either," eliciting laughter from those present. The exchange stemmed from Rudd's previous, now deleted, tweets from 2020, which were highly critical of Trump, characterizing him as the most destructive president in history and a traitor to the West. Rudd acknowledged his past criticisms, accepting responsibility for the remarks. Opposition leader Susan Lay swiftly seized the opportunity to demand Rudd's dismissal, arguing that Trump's comments rendered the ambassador's position untenable. Lay's stance reflects a significant point of contention within the Australian political landscape. Following the exchange, Trump reportedly offered an olive branch, stating all is forgiven. Despite this, the episode has ignited considerable debate about the appropriateness of Rudd's role as ambassador and the potential strain it places on the Australia-United States relationship. Rudd was appointed as ambassador in 2023, serving a 4-year term. The incident highlights the complexities of diplomatic relations, particularly when dealing with former political figures and deeply held, often critical, opinions. The Australian government's defense of Rudd underscores the importance of maintaining diplomatic channels, even amidst disagreements and past criticisms. The situation remains fluid, with ongoing scrutiny of the ambassador's conduct and the broader implications for bilateral relations. Trump's Middle East and Ukraine peace efforts face significant obstacles. Donald Trump's ambitious attempts to broker peace in both the Ukraine and Middle East conflicts are encountering substantial challenges, marked by shifting strategies, stalled negotiations, and a lack of decisive breakthroughs. The core issue revolves around Trump's tendency to overpromise and his difficulty in navigating complex geopolitical landscapes. Initially, Trump's efforts in Gaza yielded a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, but this was immediately followed by Israeli retaliatory airstrikes after Hamas accused Israel of killing 2 soldiers, destabilizing the fragile agreement. Vice President J.D. Vance traveled to Israel to reinforce the ceasefire and pressure Hamas to adhere to Trump's 20-point peace plan, a plan that relies heavily on regional support. Meanwhile, Trump's Ukrainian strategy has repeatedly faltered. A planned summit with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was abruptly cancelled after Trump expressed frustration with Zelensky's reliance on U.S. aid and questioned the effectiveness of long-range weapons. Trump's attempts to coerce Russia into negotiations have proven unsuccessful, with Putin continuing to demand territorial concessions from Ukraine. The persistent stalemate underscores Russia's unwillingness to fundamentally alter its position regarding Ukrainian territory. A key factor contributing to the difficulties is the time gap between the ceasefire in Gaza and the implementation of subsequent steps within Trump's broader plan. This period of inactivity has allowed tensions to escalate, fueling doubts about the plan's long-term viability. Hamas has exploited the lull to reassert control over Palestinians in Gaza, further complicating the situation. Trump's approach has been characterized by a desire to quickly impose solutions, a strategy that has repeatedly been undermined by the inherent complexities of the conflicts. The need for sustained U.S. engagement, coupled with the president's personal involvement, is crucial, yet the constant controversy surrounding him creates additional obstacles. Despite these setbacks, Trump remains committed to finding resolutions, seeking to leverage regional alliances to exert pressure on both Hamas and Russia. The implementation of a robust stabilization force alongside a technocratic Palestinian administration is seen as critical to achieving lasting peace, but progress remains slow. Ultimately, the success of Trump's efforts hinges on the willingness of key actors to compromise and the ability to overcome the inherent challenges of these protracted conflicts. British Grandmother Repatriation Agreement highlights Indonesia's drug sentencing policies. A repatriation agreement between the United Kingdom and Indonesia has secured the release of British grandmother Lindsay Sandiford, 68, who has been imprisoned in Bali since 2012 for drug smuggling. Sandiford was initially sentenced to death by firing squad after being apprehended at Bali's airport with 3.8 kilograms of cocaine concealed within her suitcase. She claims she was coerced into transporting the drugs by a criminal gang threatening her children. The UK and Indonesia signed the agreement, facilitated by Secretary of State Yvette Cooper and Indonesian Senior Minister of Law Yusril Iza Mahendra, allowing her return to the UK. Simultaneously, Shahab Shahabadi, 35, a British national serving a life sentence since 2014 for drug trafficking, is also being repatriated. Shahabadi was involved in an international drug network, shipping 30 kilograms of methamphetamine from Iran to his partner in Jakarta. His case highlights Indonesia's ongoing efforts to combat drug trafficking. Indonesia's approach to drug offenses under President Prabowo Subianto's administration has involved the repatriation of foreign prisoners facing severe penalties. This pattern has included the return of a Filipina facing the death penalty and 5 Australians convicted of heroin trafficking. Indonesia remains a significant drug smuggling hub despite its strict drug laws, largely due to targeting by international syndicates and its youthful population. Approximately 35 individuals are currently on death row in Indonesia, predominantly for drug-related crimes, with nearly 100 of them being foreign nationals. Indonesia last conducted executions in July 2016, involving a citizen and 3 foreigners. The agreement underscores a shift in Indonesia's approach to foreign prisoner repatriation, reflecting ongoing diplomatic efforts and concerns regarding the treatment of foreign nationals within its justice system. Methanol poisoning risks expand globally. The UK Foreign Office has significantly expanded its travel warnings due to the escalating risk of methanol poisoning stemming from the sale of counterfeit or contaminated alcoholic beverages. 8 new countries, Ecuador, Japan, Kenya, Mexico, Nigeria, Peru, Russia, and Uganda, have been added to the existing list, which previously covered Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Turkey, Costa Rica, and Fiji. This expansion follows several high-profile incidents, most notably the tragic death of 6 British tourists in Laos in 2024, highlighting the severity of the danger. The primary cause of this poisoning is the deliberate addition of methanol, an industrial chemical found in antifreeze and windscreen washer fluid, to alcoholic drinks. Unscrupulous individuals are engaging in illicit backyard brewing, while some bars and street vendors are mixing methanol into spirit-based drinks and cocktails to reduce costs. This practice poses a significant threat to travelers. Travelers are now strongly advised to exercise extreme caution, particularly when purchasing alcoholic beverages abroad. The Foreign Office has launched a new advertising campaign and updated its travel advice pages to educate individuals on recognizing the symptoms of methanol poisoning. Key warning signs include nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and confusion. Importantly, distinctive symptoms, such as blurry vision, can emerge between 12 and 48 hours after consumption, setting it apart from typical alcohol poisoning. To mitigate the risk, travelers are urged to purchase sealed drinks exclusively from licensed establishments. Strictly avoid homemade alcohol and pre-mixed spirits, cocktails, and drinks served in buckets or jugs. Anyone experiencing any of the listed symptoms should seek immediate and urgent medical attention. The Foreign Office's proactive measures underscore the importance of vigilance and awareness among British nationals traveling internationally to safeguard their health and well-being. The addition of these new countries reinforces the global nature of this dangerous threat.